Alright, so this is the first video in what will hopefully be a series of videos of kind of a discussion, I guess, of the my first custom designed 3D printer. And I say hopefully because this first attempt may completely fall apart. It might not work at all. Um, so I might make one or two videos about this, and then the whole thing doesn't work at all, and we completely give up. But hopefully that will not be what happens, and hopefully this will work. Here it is. This is pretty much the final design. I mean, I guess I hope it is, because I have these parts printed out right now. The design is sort of not the actual physical design, but I guess the idea is based on the Mobot 3D printer, which is the sort of idea behind that is to have every single part that is physically possible to 3D printed have it be 3D printed. Because of course you can't print like the motors and the screen and stuff, but anything that can be printed will be. So everything that you see here actually, other than these stepper motors, which I will get rid of. Okay, so the stepper motors are gone. So now everything here will be 3D printed, including these lead screws. And I'm not sure about the accuracy of these because I have this whole sort of stepper slider setup where there's going to be the motor here that connects to the lead screw. It turns the screw, and there's a threading on the inside of this. And since it's kind of riding up against this channel, because there's a hole through it so it can fit in there, it won't just turn in place, so this should hopefully move up and down. And there's one here in on the other side, and this is to control the z-axis. There's one across here for the x-axis, and one on the base for the y-axis. Now, since these are 3D printed, they're not gonna have the best accuracy because I think the Mobot had like, I think steel BBs in it to give it better motion. These ones are totally 3D printed other than the motors. I'm not sure what accuracy that'll lead to. Probably pretty bad. Um, I'm just kind of hoping that I can get it to physically print because I just think that if I can get it to print, then that at least qualifies as a 3D printer. So the design here, there's some. This is this is design in Fusion 360. This is really my first big thing designed in Fusion. It took a couple hours to get the design get the design good, I guess, even though it's still far from good. So you might notice that the proportions and kind of the overall look of this 3D printer is pretty odd, and the main reason for this is the way the carriages are set up, specifically the y-axis, because the way these stepper sliders work, they have to be thicker to give more rigidity, other than something like V-slot or linear rods, which can just be much thinner and more compact. This is super raised up on these little stilts, kind of, to actually get some decent Z height here. And even then, we're losing almost half of the Z height that is capable just to this. And I could make it higher, but that would make it look even worse and just waste more filament. So I didn't want to do that. It was a bit tricky to find a good way to mount the actual y-axis and get it connected to the rest of the x and z-axis. The way I did it is with these sort of braces right here, 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 and here. So they're going to screw into the bottom of the y-axis and then connect at the back here of the y-axis again, and then leading out from each side, it goes up where it connects to the z-axis. There's screws here, here, and here, and also two more down here. And these are spots where, for this very first sort of prototype, I'm just going to screw it down to a piece of wood, um, which is not a good idea, but it's what I'm going to do. Because I don't want to go through the effort, at least right now, of designing a PCB mount. Because if it doesn't work at all, I don't want to go through more effort than I need to design a motherboard mount. Something else that was a bit tricky was to find a good way to get the just kind of get in a little bit of frame rigidity, because for a while before I added in these pieces, it was only like this, and the only thing from sort of keeping these sides here from really pushing in was the x-axis, and I didn't trust that to work very well. So what I did is, if I can find them, let's see, it was that and that, is I added in these little support beams back here just to give it more rigidity. So this is just to signify that it goes up. And then the L and R shows that this is for the left side and this is for the right side. Then the ZL is for the Z-axis left, ZR is for Z-axis right. And the reason that I had to do this is because realistically these would be the same piece. Is because I'm not that great at modeling, and the hole mounts are slightly different, because I couldn't get them to be the same for some reason. So that's why there's an X here and a Y there. That's why they're all specified like that. This here is a mount for the extruder motor. So it's going to be sitting there and it's going to have a spool holder off to the side where the filament can kind of come in from the bottom, go up into the extruder assembly, and then I can wrap up here and then go into my hot end, which will be mounted to this little carriage here. The hot end will just be a standard Creality hot end with the PTFE going all the way to the nozzle. It's not going to be the best, but it should work. And Creality hot ends are pretty cheap, and I have a lot of experience with them. Over here off to the side are some other parts I was experimenting with. This down here is, I believe this was an early X-axis carriage, and this was mainly just to kind of get the threading and this sort of T-shaped hole the correct size. This here is these Z-rods over here. These were the very first model. They just have the screw thread for that mounts to the motor directly through them. And I found that to not work very well because there's very little for the thread to actually thread into. So I made it thicker down here. This is the current design, and this will change because I found that when I would tap the M3 directly into layers stacked on top of each other, opposed to just one top surface layer, that it would constantly split. So I will put a brass insert that you put heat up with a soldering iron and just kind of slide it in, and that should mount it better. This here is, I guess, sort of a bed template. So the bed material will be made out of a Ender 3 bed, which is sort of like a fake build tack, and it won't be heated, because that's just more difficult to get working, and also you have to have a more rigid mount because the heat of the bed could heat up the bed frame and make it slightly warp. So that was just going to be more work than I wanted. And this is basically, it's really just a template to print out with, low walls, low infill, pretty weak, and then I'm just going to trace out that template on the Ender 3 bed so I can get the right shape. This little lip here is just so I can peel it off easier. And last of the kind of the experiments over here was a model of the Creality hot end. I just took some calipers and used it with an old hot end that I have that I won't actually be using because it's really old and kind of gunked up and just messy, so I won't be using that particular one. But this is just a basic model of the hot end so I could get the basic height and size right. So that's pretty much it for the printer itself. For the materials, this is all that it is. It's pretty basic. So we're going to have, let's see if I can get this all on screen. We're going to have, of course, the printed frame and other parts, which is basically everything that you see here. NEMA 17 4X, and the reason I say 4X is because there will be two for each, two in total to control the Z-axis, one for the Y and one for the X, and that's only four. However, I have spare NEMA 17 from when I upgraded my Ender 3 extruder stepper, and I will be using that for the extruder stepper on this printer, which again will be mounted right here. Again, Creality hot end. I've actually already have this hot end with me currently. It's the only thing of everything I've ordered so far that has actually arrived. And pretty basic Creality hot end. I think it actually might be a knockoff of the Creality hot end, which is a knockoff of another hot end, which is kind of funny. But it should work fine. The motherboard, I basically went as cheap as I could, so I went with a Ramps 1.4, which is a pretty old board. But the reason I went with it is because it's a little bit tricky to program because you have to have the Arduino software, but it's not awful. And I just went with it because it's cheap, it's open source, so I can easily put Marlin and stuff on it. But really wanted to have this with a screen and an SD card. I didn't like the idea of having it constantly tethered to a computer because I just thought that would be annoying. So I do have a real screen and SD card kit that has also been ordered. It's not quite here yet and won't be for quite a while, but I do like that I was able to get a screen. Again, the bed material will be the Ender 3 bed. This here is the actual bed itself. And I'll just kind of, since it's not heated, doesn't matter that it'll be printed in PLA. All this will be PLA because that's just easiest to print. And I'll just stick that on top. And then here is the bed frame, which it will screw. For the bed springs, I'm just using basic pen springs because they're pretty cheap and they don't have a whole lot of resistance. It should be enough to get a decently stable bed, but it shouldn't be enough to really bow it too much because again, it will be 3D printed. It's not a solid aluminum sheet like it is in the Ender 3. The power supply, I'm not sure if this will be the final power supply. I don't know if the amperage will be enough for the hot end. Since I'm not using a heat bed, I think it should be fine, but I'm not positive. So it will be 12 volts, but the amperage might change. Connectors is this basic hot end and E-step or end stop connectors for the motherboard. End stops, just basic. Well, I think they're actually specifically designed for the ramps 1.4, but just basic micro switches. M3 screw kit. This whole thing will be assembled with M3 screws, um, which are what is going on here? Um, which are they're gonna tap directly into the plastic, at least for most of them. I think the X and Y carriage might have some threaded inserts, but they're just M3 screws. I have a lot of them already, and they just kind of work. Wire is just basic wiring for stepper motors, and just stuff like that. Stepper motors, hot end stops. And this is, like I said, I'll be mounting it directly to the piece of wood because I don't want to design in a a motherboard mount because I just did not want to do that. And that is pretty much everything. I might be missing two or three things here, but this is pretty much everything it'll need. The goal here wasn't really to make the like the cheapest, best quality printer there is. It's my first custom printer, and I just wanted it to be or hopefully it'll be my first custom printer, assuming it goes how I want it to. But I just wanted it to be fairly basic, and I wanted to get it as fully 3D printed as it could be.